everyone. So the topic of today's video is about are you feeling politically homeless or displaced? You're feeling lost, not knowing where your place is in this like political dialogue and narrative and discourse that we're having. And I wanted to talk about that today because two reasons. One, that's how I feel. And I know I'm not alone in that. And two, I know I'm not alone in that because I've seen, especially since Bernie dropped out last year, I've seen I've seen multiple conversations where people talk about where they feel politically homeless. They feel politically displaced. Like they don't know, like, I don't know where you fit in, right? Like, I don't identify with Democrat or Republican or libertarian or communist or socialist, like this group, right? Or you like pieces of this group but not the whole thing, and then you like pieces of that group that's different than this group, and depending on the issues too, right? You identify with this, but then you also identify with these people over here with this issue, and it's just kind of, it can be all over the place, right? It's not a clean box. And you know, also you might be someone like me who tends to not like labels, right? You don't like to label yourself because again, that puts you in a box of expectations and you know, assumptions that people have, and you know, like we tend to be like, can we just talk about what we think and believe and not put a label around it? But you know, the former marketing PR person in me understands why people like labels, right? Because it's it's easier for the masses to kind of like identify a box and then grasp onto that, right? Mentally, socially, emotionally, spiritually, from the soul, right? Like it's easier when we have a label, right? And then we could just take the discussion from there. So yeah, so I what I want to go into a little bit is, so if you're feeling like that, how that actually is a good thing. It is actually not a bad thing. It's not something to worry about or to feel like you're some freak or weirdo, or that you are just not getting it or you're not onboarding with things. There's a reason for that. And again, this is my perspective on things. This is what I tell myself to feel more at home here. And again, all this stuff is my opinion. You could take it or leave it. But you know, I was sharing kind of this stuff with a friend recently, and you know, it really helped them. So I thought, you know, why not share that? Because, you know, a big part of my intention with politics through inspired action is to look at politics from a different lens, and look at it from a different consciousness and vibration, which I know is starting to sound like woo-woo and metaphysical. But really, you know, that the thing about like Bernie's campaign that like made his campaign stand out from all the rest was that he was operating on a different kind of consciousness from the status quo, right? Bernie was about his consciousness level and vibration level was about like the new earth consciousness of, we're in this together, we're gonna fight for someone we don't know. This is about how we can be more connective, how we can work together, you know, to create a country that works for all of us, not just the few, right? And he also, you know, one of the things about like Bernie, like his energy and the way he shows up for people that really stood out to me, that is very different than anything I've ever seen, not just politically, but also, like, you know, I mention often that I spent almost 2 decades in Silicon Valley, which is just as combative and harsh as like Wall Street or government, right? But the thing that for me that stood out with Bernie and why I got so emotionally involved in this campaign, like twice, like I spent 5 years of my life in this, you know, what initially attracted to me about him was that I saw him as a disruptor, right? He wanted to disrupt the status quo. And that appealed to the tech startup founder, Silicon Valley in me, right? Because that energy is about disruption. How can we, break up the old systems and create the new systems? And to me, that's what Bernie represented. But what emotionally got me hooked into his campaign, his vision, and the movement of people that I met was Bernie's demonstration of tenderness. Like if you noticed, just how he interacts with people, and in particular because he's an old white man, and if you're a lot of us, our experience, with old white men in power tends to be negative, right? It tends to be one where we've been abused by them, exploited by them, physically hurt by them, emotionally, psychologically, mentally hurt by them. It just overall has not been a good experience. Tenderness is usually not something associated that we associate with old white men in power in general, right? Bernie was the opposite in that. And I remember watching one, and a lot of you saw this too, this rally he had, and somebody fainted to the side of him, and he immediately stopped his speech and went over, he left the podium and went over that person to make sure that they were okay. Which, I have never seen, I literally have never seen anyone in a position of power do that, where they are speaking to an audience of people and they literally stop because one person collapsed and needed medical help, and Bernie turned the whole camera over to make sure that this person got care and was going to be fine, and then he went back to the podium, which I was like, oh my God, we can actually have a president that actually cares about human beings. And again, what was exceptional about that moment was that he did it like that. That was instinctive to him. He didn't think about it. It wasn't a PR opportunity for him. That's who he is. And that was the first time in my life that I saw tenderness in politics, which frankly blew my mind. Right? And it's part of why I never really got into politics. In fact, even that is an understatement. Until the summer of 2015, when I discovered Bernie Sanders, I was apathetic about politics. I had never even registered to vote because I thought, what's the point? All the rich and powerful people rig the systems to make sure that the people that they want get put in there so they can maintain their greed and their power. What is the point, in doing that? So I'm just going to go about my business and doing my thing. The closest that I got to getting involved in politics at all, and activism, was in 2012 with GMO labeling. So at the time, I was a professional food blogger, and I also had health issues that were highly tied to diet. And I discovered that because my diet, although I thought was healthy, actually had a lot of foods that were made from GMOs, that, there were a lot of pesticides, toxins, in things that were, impacting my health. And then when I stopped eating those things, and actually stopped putting them on my body, right? Because that includes lotions and shampoos and makeup and stuff like that, my health drastically improved, right? So I became an activist for GMO labeling education because of my personal experience. So in 2012, there was Proposition 37 here in California, where GMO labeling got on the ballot. And this was a big deal because California is the 5th largest economy in the world. So if our state required GMO labeling, that would have a huge ripple effect, not just in the country, but globally. So of course, all the big interests, big GMO, big biotech, big pesticide, they all came in and poured in hundreds of millions of dollars, tens of millions, because I think that was the first campaign where there was like close to or over $100 million from outside the state coming in to defeat this one proposition. And sadly they won, because of all the disinformation. And then I got involved too with the GMO labeling efforts in Colorado and Washington State. And again, those bills were defeated because of huge money, special interest money that came in to basically scare people from, voting to have GMO labeling. And it's interesting that even with that, because Vermont, was the first state to actually, pass a GMO labeling law, and they were going to initiate it, and then that got stopped by, the Obama administration. So, and the corporate Democrats that were protecting the interests, again, of their big ag, big biotech, big pharma, big GMO, like, corporate donors. So, anyway, so, yeah, tenderness. So it just in that in itself was like, Bernie was opening my eyes to looking at politics in a completely different worldview and a completely different lens. One of the other things that, like, in this last campaign that really stood out to me is in some of the speeches where, the theme where people will talk about that politics at its best is about love. It is about compassion and empathy, which again is a completely different lens than when we how politics is typically looked at, right? Like when we look at political discussion, it's typically, okay, something happened in the news, and then the talking heads pontificate about their perspective from the left, the right, the up, the down, the like whatever, right? And then it just basically comes down to a perspective of, like, protecting the interests of corporations and billionaires, protecting the interests of the ego and the worldview, right? So now we're getting into this thing where it doesn't matter if it's about left or right. It's about protecting this the ego's need to be right, to win, which is why I have a tendency to not like debating in general or watching debates, because it tends to be more about like a combat sport, like who's gonna win, right? Like who can beat down the other to the point where they just, win because they just beat up the other one so much harder. Instead of like having this discussion of ideas and concepts as a way to be connective, right? To be expansive in seeing how we can solve the issue or the problem, right? Or how we can become more together. That's another reason why, like on Twitter, I tend to avoid Twitter beefs and battles and getting into it, because for me, social media is about how can I connect to people, like how can I meet others like me, like people who are on similar missions and have similar life purpose and have similar goals and similar worldview, right, or vision. That was, what was so powerful about Bernie's 2016 theme, right, a future to believe in. He painted a very clear picture of a country that works for all, right, with these concrete policies. And that's what made it so powerful, is like, here's a package of policies that will create this future where, again, people and planet are prioritized over corporations and billionaires, where, we all have a basis level of support and security, right? Like just having basic things like healthcare, clean water and air, having an education, having secure retirement, having housing, like a basic level things, so we could just feel stable and secure and not having to worry about how am I going to eat, what's going to happen if I get sick, right? That I'm not going to go bankrupt, or into massive debt, right? Or going to college to learn, to learn new things, right? To to learn skills, and to have a career, not just a job, right? Like, have a career where you feel fulfilled and have a sense of connecting with your life purpose work. And not just going to a job so you can have a paycheck and health benefits, right? And I mean, that goes back to that healthcare is a human right. It is not a privilege, nor should it be tied to a job as a benefit. That's like a social contract that we should all agree that, we're going to take care of each other on a basic level. And then everything else, yeah, go ahead, right? Do your thing, right? Like, be a business owner, be an artist, create, like, be a lover, be a healer, be a leader, like, whatever, right? But we have a basis level of health and security. And so what happens is, okay, well, we agree upon that, but then the boxes and the labels start coming in. And then because of that, then the egos start coming in. So even if we agree on the basic thing, when the ego starts getting in is when it just starts getting really funky, right? And it gets divisive. And then it gets into this who's right and who's wrong. Like, my personal thing is, I don't care about who's right or who's wrong. I care about, like, are we connecting? Like, are we getting on the same page? Even if we disagree on how something can be accomplished, can we come to a place where, sometimes, yeah, we agree to disagree, but we can be respectful of each other's differences, but we can also be respectful of seeing the commonalities that we have, right? Sharing our commonalities as human beings, our commonalities as being Americans, as being residents of planet Earth, right? Of being, our commonality as being fellow sentient beings. Like, how can we come together, and be more connective in that way? Because that's how we're going to create a country that works for all. That's how we're going to create, these new systems that, again, are based on connection and not based on division. Because in order for capitalism to survive, it needs that division to keep going on. It needs for us to be compartmentalized, to be separated, to be divided, and to constantly be fighting each other. Because we won't get on the same page. We won't sit at the same table. And if we do, then we're just fighting and bickering with each other because our egos need a sense of righteousness of being right, instead of like, okay, how can we listen to each other and be connective? And that's something that Bernie was so good at. He was so good at doing that. That's why he could go on a Fox News and do a town hall and get a whole bunch of a room full of, like, Republican or conservative and right-leaning people to agree, like, yeah, healthcare is a human right. No, I shouldn't go bankrupt or into debt because of healthcare. Yeah, Medicare for all sounds like a great idea. Let's do it, right? I mean, in the 2020 campaign, Bernie's town hall on Fox News was the most viewed out of all the town halls, like, out of all of them. And people walked away watching that, again, feeling like, hey, this guy makes sense. He's not radical. He's saying things that are common sense that go back to our commonalities as human beings, right? As caring, loving, empathetic, compassionate human beings. And so back again to this, so you're feeling politically homeless and displaced, it's because, yeah, you don't want to live in this status quo consciousness, right? You don't want to, you don't have a home in this division, in this constant, like, contributing to, like, well, how can I contribute to keeping people divided and disconnected and all of that, right? Like, you're just not interested in that. And that's because your interest, if you're like me and many others, who gravitated towards Bernie's campaign, was that you were more interested in building the new systems, right? You are interested in the new earth consciousness of, again, we're in this together, we're going to fight for someone we don't know, we're going to create a country and systems that work for all of us, where we all have a basis level of security, to just live. And then we have a livable planet, because we're in a climate crisis, right? That again, everything else is secondary if the planet is not livable. And I live in California, and I can tell you, like, the fire season last year was brutal. And this year we're having an even drier season. You know, our governor already declared officially that we're in a drought, and it's been super dry here. We've had almost no rain, which has been frightening, right? So one of my personal concerns, again, is like on the climate crisis and climate action, and how are we going to get together on that. So again, that goes back into a thing where if you're feeling politically homeless and displaced, it's because you're looking at the crisis in terms of like, well, holy crap, like, there's an enormous amount of work that has to be done. But the main thing is like the consciousness has to shift, you know, in order for us to really start acting boldly and aggressively to stop, you know, stuff before the irreparable damage starts to happen. And you know, because right now the way things are operating is, you know, the special interests, the billionaires, the corporations don't want the economy to change, because the current economy makes them billions of dollars. Changing into this new economy, this green economy, this sustainable economy, is loss of power for them, and potential loss of revenue, and market share and power, and they don't want that. Even though the fact that building an entire new economy that is sustainable and green represents a whole bunch of opportunity. There's a whole lot of money to be made, right? If we're just going to get to basic capitalism, right, with new markets, new opportunity, I mean, you know, I hate using him as an example, but I mean, because I just, you know, but okay, whatever. But like Elon Musk is a great example of, like, he sees, you know, he saw this opportunity, right? So he created Tesla with the electric cars, and now they've got the division that creates battery power, right? So now you can have, like, your whole roof is built out of these panels, you know, to take in the sun, and then you have a battery system to maintain that, which also means you could probably get off of PG&E, right? Which is another thing too. You as an individual can be energy independent, and doing it using like natural things like the sun. So again, and he's now become the second wealthiest human on Earth, right? So plenty of opportunity. So you would think it would be common sense that they would just move into this like new opportunity. I mean, China has clearly seen that, because if we look at like in the energy sector, like sustainable green energy sector, I was looking at some list, and they listed like the top 10 green solar wind like companies in the world, and China had like 6 or 7 in there. Like they clearly, which is how they're going to be a superpower, probably taking over us economically, because again, they have clearly seen like the next big money is going to be in green and sustainable, and they've already jumped on it way ahead of us than we have. So again, back to the feeling politically homeless and displaced. Again, it's okay, and you're not alone, because we still have the movement, right? A lot of people in Bernie's movement that he sparked, and it really, and I should clarify this, it's not Bernie's movement anymore. It is our movement. It is not me, us, which again was never about him. It was about this movement of creating this vision, right? This future to believe in, where we have a country that works for all of us, where nobody is left behind, nobody is left out, nobody is there to suffer, you know, unnecessarily, where everyone has a basic level of living and being in our country, where we can feel safe, right? Where, because we shouldn't feel terrified to go to the mall or to a movie or to go to work and feel like we're gonna get gunned down, right? Or we're getting pulled over by the police and that we're gonna get shot, right? Or shot in our own home by police, by people who are supposed to be protecting us. There's so many things that, you know, that are happening that again are just, they're not right. They've got to be changed, because, you know, we can't live like this anymore. It can't go on like this anymore. And, you know, going back to the subject of tenderness, that's something that is severely lacking in our current culture and in this current system of capitalism. Because if you think about it, modern capitalism is based on cruelty. It's unkind, it's unsympathetic, there's little empathy. It's all about profits at no cost. And one of the worst examples we're seeing of this is with the pandemic. And the COVID vaccines, right? It should be common sense. It should be a no-brainer to open up the IP on the vaccines to the world, and also offer raw materials and expertise to mass manufacture these vaccines safely, so we can get everyone vaccinated and stop this pandemic now. Because it's just gone. It's just gone on, and it's going to keep going on if we don't do anything. But right now, what's prioritizing, you know, these big pharma companies who have made billions of dollars so far on these vaccines, want to protect their IP, which again, Bernie said that's morally incomprehensible. I say that's morally bankrupt, right? And if we're going to be this, you know, if we're going to heal the soul of the nation, then a soul with a nation would be a leader in helping the whole world and doing everything it had in its power and its resources and its money and its influence to eradicate and stop this pandemic now. Because it's in our self-interest to do that, so we can get back to, you know, some form of normal. Like we're not going to have normal as we knew before the pandemic. A lot of that is gone, and we're going to have these new paradigms, you know, post COVID-19. Because also another thing, even though we've stopped COVID-19, when we get to that point, we haven't fixed the system that enabled a pandemic like that to happen in the first place. In fact, like, there's already data out, and I totally agree with this because I've been working in this area, but the next big pandemic will probably originate in the factory farm system, because it is just, right now, it's horrifying what's happening there right now. But, you know, we'll leave that for another discussion. But we are not in the clear in terms of never having another pandemic like this or worse in the future. And again, that goes back into, okay, we see these, you know, we see these problems and these issues. So where do I politically fit into this? And just so you know, again, you're not alone. We're not here to be defenders or enablers or keepers of that old system. We're here to build the new systems. And so for now, we just got to figure out like how to come together and how to work together. Like that's something I think about often. But one thing I do appreciate in the Not Me Us movement, even though we don't fit neatly in any boxes and we don't fit in any clean labels, we have each other. It's one of the reasons I love going to Twitter on the Bern Identity, is because of all the people, so many people that I've met, and like-hearted, kind-spirited, fellow sentient beings who, again, we share this commonality of compassion, of love, of empathy, and this vision of this future to believe in. And so we will continue that work, and we're not alone. We have a movement now. And so we just got to figure out, again, how to work more cohesively together, moving forward. So anyway, that's it for today. But in the comments, like, leave me your thoughts. Tell me what you've been thinking or feeling. If you've done videos or blog posts, like, share them, and let's get a discussion going. Thanks.